I don't know if you know the story, but Venezuela went to the gutter thanks to a
Yeah.
socialist dictatorship. So that eventually fell through. But at the time, it was very successful, and in the kind of product that we were selling, it wasn't that good. The service was really good, and the people taking care of the customers were really knowledgeable and really personable as well. But the product itself, we were selling the least, I would say, attractive kind of uh, frames made in China because those were the cheapest one to get.
Martians landed.
Yes.
Wearing Prada suits.
Yes.
Drinking Henry's seltzer.
Yes.
Chewing juicy fruit.
Yes, and?
Your branding here.
Yes, brand.
Your message here.
Yes, and?
A verse about
Yes.
your product here.
Yes.
I'm Hirsch Redfin.
Yes, and?
I'm a message therapist.
Yes.
And I have a podcast.
Yes, brand.
That's right, that's it.
Yes.
We'll help you fix the world.
Yes.
Or your bottom line.
All right.
Your bottom line.
Get it. I get it. Welcome to the Yes Brand Podcast.
In the hot seat today on Yes Brand is Gabriel Delarosa. Gabriel's a principal at Intelligent Relations, and across his 14 plus years in marketing and communications, he's helped startups and Fortune 500 companies be featured in the best publications in the world. He recently joined a VC and will be funding startups all across Latin America. And currently based in Barcelona, we welcome Gabriel to the Yes Brand podcast. Welcome, Gabriel.
Thank you so much, Hirsch. That was a very kind introduction.
It's
I
my
hope I can
pleasure.
live up to the par.
It's my pleasure to have you. And let's start with the question of exposure in 2024. Because I've done public relations in the past, I've done communications, I've done creative as well, but it's always about getting the attention of the audience. And how is the dynamic in 2024?
Well, to be honest, I don't think that the fundamentals have changed across history. I will say I don't want to sound pretentious, but I do have a bachelor in philosophy, and I have to bring that up because I had to show some value from getting that degree at some point. and one of the things that I always thought, whenever I'm advising founders, I try to skip the pretentious part of it, but I do have always in the back of my mind the fundamentals that Aristotle explained almost 2,400 years ago, and it's basically the same rules that we've been using for communication and for exposure. I do think that still apply today. So I'd like to encompass those, and I'm not going to bore you with the academic details and the Greek words and stuff like that. But I do think that explaining like the different parts of how people communicate, both in the personal side and also the corporate side, could be helpful for everyone. So I will start with, we will usually use an image, kind of a triangle, and we will explain that at the top of that triangle, we have the logical, rational part of the way that we communicate, which I come from working with technology startups, both as a PR and also now as a VC. And I will say that most CEOs that I advise to overly focus on communicating rationally because they think that the markets and whenever people make a decision to buy a product, the decision-making process is entirely rational, which I don't think that is. So that's the first point. The second point will be the emotional part of the argument, which I will say I'm not explaining this as I think that one has prevalence over the others, but the I will say that the emotional part is equals time as important as the logical rational side. And then you have the aesthetic part of it. And I'm going to populate these with examples so I don't make these as boring as it sounds. And then you have a fourth one, which I think that you can relate to that very, very strongly, which Aristotle called timing, which is the way that you deliver stuff, the way that you say things at the moment that you say those kinds of things, they have the same prevalence that all the other factors. And you being a comedian, if I remember correctly, I do think that you can appreciate, having the best joke and having, sitting down and writing the best joke that you can think of, and then delivering that joke to the public is an entirely different game.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. When I actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, the comedy background, because I come to this with not only a sense of humor, but also a sense of timing. And I think that's why the whole business of branding, of public relations, and of brand building makes sense to me, because I understand the timing and respect it. Now, from your point of view, tell the audience a little bit, Gabriel, about how you came to be in this industry.
Okay, that okay. I should have had that prepared. So this is going to be breaking news for everyone, because I haven't told that story to anyone, which I believe that I should have. But I started my first company when I was 20, and it was a theater producing company, which I did everything that most founders. Obviously, we didn't have that terminology back then. This is 14 years ago, and I was back in Venezuela. But I did all the steps that most founders do whenever they have to build a company nowadays. So I approach investors. I actually approached my previous employer. I was working as an assistant, basically what you would call an executive assistant. So the
Okay.
guy that brings you the tea and buys the cookies at the office and stuff like that. I was very young, and I approached them and I pitched them the idea. I prepared a presentation. I pitched them the idea, and because the initial funding that I required to build the company was basically pennies to them, they gave me the money. And they say, hey, we like you. This is not going to be a huge investment. This sounds fun. So go ahead and do it. So I started producing comedy plays at the what was then the BOD, the most important theater in the country. And I failed miserably, horribly. But along the way, I learned a lot of stuff. And while I was burning through VC money while achieving that, I made a bunch of famous people that were really good at personal branding, and they invited me to parties because they thought that I was a big shot producer. They were very wrong, obviously. But I was the new kid in town, and I was producing this larger than life play, and that kind of impressed them. So they wanted to get familiar with me in case that I would consider them for future plays. So after that failed, I went into a horrible depression. And then afterwards, I started working at an optics company, an optics store, a chain of optics stores. And they were really, it was a family business that were really struggling, especially with marketing, because they haven't, in the 60 plus years of existence, they never invested in marketing. They didn't believe in that. And they said that their product and their service spoke for them. So they didn't need any of that. And I told them that I strongly believe that they were wrong, and that I could grab all the knowledge that I gather from all these people that really knew how to do personal branding and translate that to their business, and maybe bring them along as well to promote their brand. And that's
Did
what
you
I
tell
did.
them, Gabriel, that you were a famous producer, theater producer, who knew all of the famous people in Venezuela?
No, I was very ashamed of that. Actually. I was very, very ashamed of that. And that wouldn't work with an old Jewish family
Yeah.
that actually had a very harsh opinion on celebrity, and they thought that the whole thing was in marketing in general. They thought that that was very vapid. And they had
Yeah.
this really strong, I would say, rational by the numbers stance on it. So when I actually created the Instagram account, I started copying what was working for other brands around the globe that resemble the values and the products that this family company did. So that started working, and we became the most famous optic brand in the country, and we started selling like crazy. And people had to we had lines of people outside of the stores, and the to be completely honest, and now that these optic stores that they no longer exist, because I don't know if you know the story, but Venezuela went to the gutter thanks to a
Yeah.
socialist dictatorship. So that eventually fell through. But at the time, it was very successful, and in the kind of product that we were selling, it wasn't that good. The service was really good, and the people taking care of the customers were really knowledgeable and really personable as well. But the product itself, we were selling the least, I would say, attractive kind of uh, frames made in China, because those were the cheapest one to get and the only ones that as Venezuelans we were able to afford and stuff like that. But in that case, I would say that it was the power of the brand, and it was the fact that I truly wanted to show the family as well, the dad and the kids, because they all work at the store. So I try to show that as well, and try to show the store as a very approachable place,
So they had a
and as
great
an
culture.
yeah,
They
they
had
had a
great
great
culture.
culture. They had a great culture, and also Venezuela, especially at that time, was extremely violent, extremely violent. So what I saw this place as an oasis in the middle of that. So come here, this will be like your second house. This will be like your own family that will treat you really well, that will only sell you things if you truly need them, and that they will value you as a human being and not as a
Sure.
means to an end to increase revenue. So I'm saying all of this, and I'm to be honest, that's what I will say that most, especially tech companies, struggle with, is achieving
Yeah.
this level of emotional engagement with the audience. Because even though that you might be selling software, you are not just selling software, you are selling a bunch of other things that are attached to that solution that you want to promote.
Yeah. And that's a very good point, because the fact that software isn't a person, that software isn't a relationship, doesn't mean that the process of marketing it or connecting with the audience is transactional, is not emotional, right?
Yeah, it is. It is very emotional. It also has an aesthetic component of it. Going back to the first things that I was saying,
Yeah.
I was for example, and I don't like quoting Steve Jobs so much, because I do think that most people know most of his most famous quotes to heart.
Okay. Yeah.
But the fact that he was very adamant on the way that things looked, and the fact that he invested so much, and even in his biography, the one that I thought Walter Isaacson wrote, he's always talking about the aesthetic component of both the hardware and the software. So for him, it was always an aesthetic experience. If people don't think that it looks well and don't think that it looks well on them, and this is not just for B2C, I would say for B2B, this applies as well. A good user experience, the fact that you're able to look at something and say, not nowadays, I've seen a bunch of really famous marketers say, coining the term premium software, which is basically the same that you would do with Gucci, but now applied to software, which is software
Right.
that you will pay more to get and to use because it looks better and it feels better when you use it, even though that you will be able to solve the same problem practically using Excel.
Well, this issue of perception versus reality is pretty much everything in a nutshell. It's I always advocate what I call selling the truth in messaging, but at the same time, to get to the audience is all about their emotions and their expectations and tapping into those things and forming a relationship there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, again, I think that every component of what I just mentioned is equally important. But there's this really interesting example that whenever I give this lecture, the students love, which is, do you remember, how old are you, Hesh, by the way?
57.
57. Okay, so this is before your time, but September
Well, you don't
26,
seem to be before my.
1960.
You seem to be a
No,
little bit after
I'm,
my
I'm
time.
young. I'm young, but I'm a history buff. And
Okay.
that's why I'm bringing up this anecdote, because I was going to say, hey, do you remember what
Yeah.
happened? Where were you in September 26, 1960?
Yeah, I wasn't anywhere yet.
Me neither. Me neither. But it's a very interesting date, and I think they will help us illustrate this point better, because that was the first ever televised presidential debate in U.S. history,
Okay.
and
Kennedy
that
and
Yes,
Nixon. Yeah.
yes, that's right, and I know that this anecdote this piece of history is kind of overused at this point, but I do think that it would serve to illustrate this point better, because that was it's not just the introduction or the it's not just television going mainstream. It's the fact that the perception of people that watch the debate via TV versus the perception of people that listen to the debate on the radio was entirely different. And that's what I would say many historians believe, that that's one of the first really big gaps in perception that Americans experience, especially in the political arena, because the people that watch the debate on television overwhelmingly felt that Kennedy won because he was very handsome, he appeared calm, composed, he wore a dark suit that contrasted really well with the background during that time, and he also had a really strong presence on stage. But then the people that listened to Nixon on the radio, they thought that Nixon won because Nixon actually had arguably better arguments. He
Mhm.
knew the topic better, and he was able to explain his solutions better, and his proposal was more sound, it was more rational, it was more logical. So that's one of the things that's why I say that both things matter. There's also the other piece of the puzzle, which is that Nixon, he had recently been hospitalized, and he looked very pale and tired. And because he thought that wearing makeup was gay, because he was allegedly homophobic, he refused to wear makeup on stage.
Right.
And he was very sweaty, and he also was unshaven, and he wore a suit that was very light colored, that didn't contrast with the background, so people weren't able to see him very well on the TV as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and not only that, in the final analysis, Kennedy's TikTok account was much more popular. Nixon had only just started dancing, and so his moves on TikTok were really awkward. And in the end, Kennedy won, and that was largely attributed to both his TikTok and Snapchat popularity. But
Yes,
I may be
that's another
exaggerating.
piece of history that most historians
That's right.
look at.
That's right. Um, yeah, but that's a very, but it's very true, and it was pivotal. It definitely was pivotal, and there's both good and bad to that. I think, you
Yeah.
know, substance kind of died in a way that day. You know,
Mm.
if you want to look at it, if you want to put a certain amount of emphasis on it, it's the evolution that has happened since has made it very hard to cling to substance, to gain knowledge. We gain information at a rate that we never did before, but perhaps knowledge has been slower to be gained. How do you think that that has evolved in the decades since, both from a historical point of view, but also from your point of view of what you do now in your own life experience?
I like to give this example because it's kind of disheartening in a sense, because and this happens all around the world. When you go to school, whenever they ask you to write an essay, what do they tell you? That the essay has to be long, and preferably, you have to fill in you have to write as many words as possible, and you have to find a way to make it as long, and I would say as tedious as you can. And that's not the way that most people communicate it, and at least of all how they communicate nowadays. What I've seen in the past 14 years is that if you only had, you know, this, do you know where elevators pitches come from? That
Yeah. No,
okay,
I don't actually, but
okay, the story of elevator pitching is that when Hollywood started, when people wanted to pitch a story to a big time producer, they only had the time that that producer would give them from the from when they will meet them in the elevator up until their office.
uh-huh.
So that will basically be from 30 to 60 seconds. So
Yeah.
that's an elevator pitch. I will say that nowadays you have 5 seconds.
Yeah.
The time span has decreased as our or attention span has decreased as well. So I will say that you need to, instead of, most people think that they need to have a plot twist at the end of what they say, and they bury their most important message at the bottom, either on press releases or whenever they go on stage or things like that. Life doesn't work like that.
Hmm.
Netflix does, but life is not like that. If you want to catch people's attentions, you need to have your strongest point at the start,
Yeah.
and then you can say, whatever, to illustrate your point or to explain what you meant. But if you're going to be outrageous, you have 5 seconds to grab the people's attention and then explain yourself away.
Yeah. Yeah. And the test that I use with clients is I say, look at your bio and look at the first line and the last line and see if they should be switched. Because sometimes people at the end of their bio will say the most personal, most important, and most interesting thing that distinguishes them from everybody else. But at the same time, they lead with what they think people want to hear, perhaps their title, perhaps it's the awards they've won, or something of that nature. But they don't often start with the 5 second key pitch golden nugget that they need to give people right away to distinguish them.
Yeah, and that happened to me. Again, I wasn't ready to share this anecdote, but I think it really helps now. But I was working with what was at the time the head of the Puerto Rico accelerator program for startups. He was a really interesting guy, and he, the first time that I met him, he explained like his expertise as a VC and all that, the boring parts of his stories, and then he closed like, and by the way, I have 3 Grammys. He's like, what? Yeah, that's how I made my money. I was actually a music producer. I have 3 Grammys. It's like, why didn't you start with that?
Yeah.
From all the things that you just said, that's that's the hook. Then
That's
you
the
can tell
hook.
me about
Yeah.
their personal journey, and then you can tell me about all the other things that you did afterwards. But that you should start with that.
Yeah. It's in fact, it's that thing that people, we can't be emotional about about ourselves. We can be emotional about the audience. If we know the audience, if you're, and it depends what your audience is. The opening sentence for somebody who cured cancer might be, three-time Grammy winner so and so has found a cure for cancer.
Mhm.
Because if that's gonna, if the three-time Grammy win is gonna really get the attention of that particular audience, then you got to lead with that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I will add to that that yes, most people don't do that because it's what I was saying, that they overly emphasize this logical structure and this rational approach to communications instead of taking into account the other components of it, as
Yeah.
we explain it. And I will say that another um really interesting example that I just want to mention, because I thought that that in itself could be an entire episode. Um, in 1971, Coca-Cola, what is arguably its most famous ad, it was a bunch of kids all around the world, and they sang a song titled "I'd like to buy the world a Coke,"
Right.
and it didn't show the product. It was that most people, when they almost didn't air this ad, because as it didn't show the product, it only showed the message, and it only mentioned the company at the end. They thought that it was it was going to be an utter failure.
Yeah.
But afterwards, the ad aired, and and again, the emotional component and also the timing, because it was a very complicated time, the middle of the Vietnam War and the the Soviet scare, and all of the things that were going on around the world at the time. It really struck a chord with people. But then fast forward 40 plus years later, and Pepsi tried to do the same with Kylie Jenner. I don't know if you remember.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And
That was
yeah, this is when,
the tone deaf ad as well. Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, and the people behind that ad, they were trying to copy, and they were trying to, they thought that it was going to be legendary,
Mm-hmm.
because they studied history, and they saw that that was the most, Coca-Cola had the most successful ad, so they could do more or less the same stuff, but emulating current real world events in the middle of a protest. And they Kylie Jenner would use a Pepsi to stop the policemen from, attacking the
Police
protesters.
brutality and
Yes.
police brutality with a smile, with a Pepsi and a smile, or a Coke and a
Yes.
smile.
Yes. So I would say that's another example for me of timing. That wasn't, perhaps the idea on paper sounded really good because it stroked the, I would say, the logical and emotional and even the aesthetic component. You have Kylie Jenner, which, I don't know, one of the most beautiful girls in the world, and at that time she was really famous as well, and
Yeah.
it was really well shot. The commercial itself, it was really well shot. They spent a lot of money producing that stuff, but it was bad timing, and it came out as disingenuous.
Yeah.
And to be honest, Coca-Cola was doing more or less the same, but they had better timing, and they had I would say, a better approach to it. And when they did it, it was, kind of like the first time that somebody did something along those lines. So that really helped as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much so. Well, Gabriel, I like to give my guest the last word, and and our conversation, as a lot of them on Yes Brand are, is kind of wide ranging and but really a pleasure. But first, tell the audience where they can find you, and then if you can take us out with some thoughts, whatever thoughts you want to leave the audience with, that would be wonderful.
Sure. Add me on LinkedIn. I know that LinkedIn is very cringy, especially for millennials and Gen Zers, but that's where business is at the moment, especially if you work mostly on the B2B side, such as myself. So find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to answer any questions, to even hop on a call. I really love branding. I really love talking about this stuff, and I don't have that many people to do it because most of my friends will get very, very bored if I do so. So help me from losing all of my friends, and reach out to me on LinkedIn. And last but not least, I will say, and I'm going to quote your latest well, at the time, your latest guest, Donnie, if I remember correctly, which is invest in personal branding. Please do. Please invest in personal branding. Everything that I just said, I hope that you can find some usefulness in it, that you can leverage for your personal branding, and don't overlook those components that I just quote, because I will say that careers are very, very long, and your personal branding is going to help you get to places that couldn't even imagine that you will be able to achieve. And that will be my take in 2 minutes or less.
All right.
If you liked the show,
Yes, and
it worked for you,
yes, then
subscribe and leave a
yes, friend.
5-star review.
Yes, friend.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Did I make it clear?
Yes, friend.
Get your branding on
Yes.
before they're gone.